These may seem strange scriptures for what I'm going to talk about. But can I say they came to me? I can do it. I didn't want microphone for breakfast, but that's what I'm going to have. 1 Peter 1:13 says, "Therefore, with minds that are alert and fully sober, set your hope on the grace to be brought to you when Jesus Christ is revealed at his coming." Wanted to go on with that one. As obedient children, do not conform to the evil desires you had when you lived in ignorance. But just as he who called you is holy, so be holy in all you do. For it is written, "Be holy because I am holy." And the other one says many things to many people. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So say the words of our scriptures. As most of you know, Halloween is Tuesday. You also know that its name is derived from two words. Hallow, which means sacred, and eve, which means before an event. It is the root word also of our word evening, but we most often use eve to indicate an important event that's coming. What important event can be hallowed on November the 1st? In the Catholic Church, November the 1st is known as All Saints' Day on the liturgical calendar. It's a day set aside to honor all the saints of the Church. In the Catholic belief, each day has its own saint to be honored. However, in case one is forgotten or there's not enough days in the year, and that seems to be the problem now, November 1 is set aside to honor all of them. November 2nd is the honor day for all souls that were not canonized by the Church. As with many feast days of the early Church, this one was born out of the necessity to replace a pagan festival with a Christian one. The pagans celebrated the time around the last week of October as a time when it was easier to connect with the spirit world. But they really didn't want to do that. They were frightened that the dead would return and so built fires and wore masks to scare them away. By removing the frightening aspects of this and making it a time to celebrate those who have gone before, the Church was able to allow the celebrations to continue within the sphere of Jesus Christ. The Mexican Day of the Dead is one of these celebrations that still survives. Now we come to the reason that, in case you were wondering, that Protestant churches don't revere saints as they are revered in the Catholic Church. As we have learned in our own times, the old adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely, can happen anywhere at any time. As the Catholic Church became powerful, the selling of saints' relics and indulgences became the main way to support the Church's business. Many clergy, however, were not happy with this, and they risked everything to make a change within the Church. When they couldn't, they broke away and protested the ways of the Church. Hence, they became known as Protestants. One of the things these new Protestants were against was the worship of the saints. They saw that only the one in three God was worthy of worship. They also wanted no one between them and God. So saints were not needed. They were used as emissaries, passageways, and they weren't needed. But the Catholic Church is still beifying and canonizing people to become saints. If you're not aware, Mother Teresa is going through that process. I started wondering and thinking, where are the saints today? They can't all be in one church. Our God created the whole world. He had to put them all over the world. If you strip away a very convoluted process to become a saint, you find that you must be dead and have extensive proof that the person lived and died in such an exemplary and holy way that he or she is worthy to be recognized as a saint. There are many, many, many processes, and it takes many, many, many years. But basically, those two things must be there. They must also have done a miracle that was witnessed by at least 3 people. It sounds as if you would have to know someone very well, and he or she would have to be perfect to reach this pinnacle, to be put up for consideration as a saint. But I believe we have many uncanonized saints in our midst. I want to share some stories with you and see if you can find some in your midst, too. St. Francis of Assisi did not start out to be a saint. He was the son of wealth, and he liked all the trappings of his lifestyle. He liked the fun, he liked the merriment, he liked the nice clothes, he liked the friends he had. However, he was always instinctively sympathetic toward the poor, and he gave many things to them. This bothered his father, because his father was a wealthy silk merchant, and his dad liked all the money he had and didn't want it given away by Francis, who was wanting to do something for the poor. He finally broke completely away from his father because Francis wanted to build a church, and his father would not let him spend the money on it. So Francis gave all the money back and said, "From now on, I will have no money." He came to believe in brotherly love and peace. His miracles revolved around the wounds that he received on his body. They're called stigmata, for those of you that might want to know that. They are the places in which Christ was wounded. It is said that St. Francis had the nails, had the feet, had the tore place in his side. But he bore them with no complaint. And that was probably more of a miracle than we might want to think it. Now, many of us that are in here attended the funeral of Gisela Weber last year, 2 years ago. One of the things that stayed with me from that day was the beautiful organ music that we heard. Kyla Rothenberger is a professional organist who shared her talent with us that day. But she did more than that. She was here for Gisela. We listened to Gisela every week. I don't know how many of you knew how nervous she got every time she played, but she did. Sometimes she made a mistake. We let it go, or 2 or 3. But Kyla didn't make any mistakes that day. And what Kyla was remembering was that Gisela was the one who began her on the path so that she could make such beauty and such purpose with her life. That's a miracle to me. the teaching of another, you hope makes things better. And when you teach someone and they surpass the things that you know, and they use what you taught them to make the world a better place, how much more of a miracle could you want to see? We can all attest, those of us that were here, to that miracle that we heard that day. Now, we all know that Gisela liked her wine and she liked a good laugh. You can see she shared some traits with the young Francis. But she knew what was most important in her life, and that's what she clung to, even at the end, with very little complaint. Another martyr of the early church is St. Stephen. And St. Stephen was one of the first martyrs of the early church. Oh, by the way, as an aside, just because I thought this was interesting, the word martyr comes from the Greek word for witness. Think about that the next time you're asked to witness. Stephen was stoned to death because he witnessed for Christ, and he would not stop. How strong is your faith? How much would you do to witness to someone? Because I can tell you, if you start to witness to them, they're going to walk away and they don't want to hear that. For those of you that have done that over and over, you've felt the stones. I know you have. St. Stephen was appointed a deacon of the early church. The leaders discovered that the widows of those who were being killed as martyrs were not being taken care of. Because in those days and times, if a woman did not have a man, she had to depend on the kindness of strangers or beg in the streets. And it was not right, the fellowship of Christ thought, that those widows should be made to suffer again after they had already suffered so much. So they started to appoint deacons, and St. Stephen did this for a long time. He took care of those suffering Christian widows. He took care of those orphans as part of what the church does. Mary Nutter was always interested in raising money to help people of the community. She worked tirelessly for many charitable programs. For those of you who did not have a chance to meet her, she was a fireball. The church that we are in celebrates her memory every year and her spirit with the Mary Nutter chili and cinnamon roll cook-off, which I see by my bulletin is coming November 19th. The cook-off this year, it says the money raised is going to go to help families in need at Christmas. A miracle, perhaps? She's following very much in St. Stephen's footsteps. I'm sure they've enjoyed talking about how they helped each other, how they helped everyone around. Many times we don't realize saints and their miracles until they have left us. Everyone we mention in our roll call today showed someone a miracle during their life. Lorene was one of those candles that's sitting there. And that, in some ways, was a walking miracle. She had done many, many things in her life, but she was not particularly boastful of them. But she had a really good time in her life. And as she got older, she never lost that joy, that happiness. She'd feel bad. Believe me, anybody who's over 40 gets a crick now and then. But she never complained as much as she would always make you laugh. They were not perfect, but they enriched our lives, our 5 candles, and everyone else that we've sent to heaven from here. But perfect doesn't always define a saint. Did they live and die in such a way that someone saw their commitment to the Lord and their fellow man? Maybe not you, maybe not me, but maybe someone. Did they commit their commitment to did they commit an unselfish act or acts that carried no glory with them, but those acts needed to be done? Who was always here when we needed them here? Who makes things go behind the scenes? Is every day of his or her life one that the Lord would enjoy? If you have a saint in your life, or one that's available to you, don't keep it inside. We as God's people need to be able to meet and see the saints that are possible in everyone we meet. The saints are in there. We must be able to see them and to draw them out. We don't need to worship saints, but we do owe them the recognition of the saints that they are. Let's not wait until our saints die to thank them for what they've done for us. There are many mentors in this church, and they mentor different people in different ways. But they need to know that they have mentored you. Think about all the saints you have known, and thank God for sending them your way. Make sure that if they're still with us, they know. We can all celebrate the saints on November the 1st. So let's do that. Amen.